I'm Brian Carpenter, host of Fresh Air at 5, part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
While the world of education hasn't fully returned to normal, undoubtedly, you've considered the future of education like I have. You've tried many tools and strategies over the last 12 to 15 months. I know I can't change all of education right now by myself, but I do have a say about what my classroom will look like going forward. The pandemic put educators like you and me through the ringer, and I've given serious thought about what many classrooms, starting with my own, could look like going forward. I know there are teachers out there just chomping at the bit to go back to what they used to do. And in some cases, that's great. But for so many others, going backwards will be just that, going backwards. Returning to comfortable will be a disservice to those educators and the students they supposedly serve. So what's the answer? I think it's blended learning. Strike up the band.
Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nessie. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Well, not everybody. It's just you and me. Good to be back on the microphone. It's been about a month since I released the last episode of the podcast, and that was episode 178, and that was for my 40th birthday, where I opened up and shared some stuff. And first, let me thank everybody who submitted feedback and shared their thoughts and appreciated, the vulnerability that I showed. You don't get that on too many education podcasts, or other podcasts for that matter. Well, the good podcasts will certainly make you feel like you are connected and are a part of something more than just listening. And certainly that's what I try to foster here. So again, I appreciate you for reaching out and sharing and appreciating. That's how I feel. But what I shared at the end of that episode, and if you haven't listened, well, you missed it. Well, you didn't miss it. It's a podcast. Go back and listen to the very end of the episode. But I did want to share an update. So first, let me also thank everybody who reached out based on the news that I shared at the end of episode 178. I really appreciate that. And this hasn't been an easy month, but things are interesting. The follow-up to that is that it took an interesting turn, and the surgery that I had scheduled for, as I'm recording this a few days ago, had to be postponed because I experienced a severe allergic reaction to the MRI contrast when I got my very first MRI when I turned 40. The MRI had to be done as part of the pre-op procedure for what I'm having done to my foot. And the reaction I had led to a massive, and I'm not going to get too graphic and detailed, led to a massive full body rash, skin infection, something. It wasn't pretty. And there's a few people who obviously had seen me and know what I was dealing with. And as I sit here recording this, I am almost 100%. The medication that I've been taking has certainly helped. And it's made going to school uncomfortable in more than one way. I'm not going to get into that here, but it's been different. It's been different. But again, the infection and the rash and the irritation from the MRI contrast, almost done with that. So a new surgery date has been scheduled for June 16th, and I will certainly keep you posted about everything, and I do sincerely appreciate all of the well wishes. Now, if this is your first time tuning into this podcast, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So, go back and listen to episode 178 and listen all the way through, and you'll be up to speed on what's going on with Chris Nesi here in April and May and now June of 2021. The rest of this episode is devoted to the future and what I think many classrooms and schools should turn to, and that's blended learning. And this episode was sparked by friend of the podcast, Dan Kreines, host of the Leader of Learning podcast, and he shared in a group that we're in together with other education podcasters and content creators, where he shared that in his role, he had a conversation with a colleague about, they might find it difficult and they might be looking forward to, going back to the way things were. And, Dan has a great positive attitude and saw the positive in what many people would perceive to be this person's, negativity and, almost backwards way of thinking. And, Dan, in sharing that, mentioned the idea of blended learning. And as he was telling the story, that's the term that popped into my head. And I was like, Dan's going to say blended learning. He's going to say blended learning. That's got to be the answer to this. And sure enough, that Dan came to the same conclusion, with a colleague of his. So blended learning is a term that we've used before, flipping the classroom. Again, how are we integrating technology? Really, it's the whole purpose of this podcast. How can we take the technology that's out there, whether it's meant for education or not, and how can we use technology to make teaching easier, better, more effective? How can we make learning easier, better, more effective? And blended learning really brings together the best of both worlds. When we think of antiquated, out-of-date teaching models versus, the new fang-dangled ways of doing things, how do we bring the two together? Because there are parts of education that are antiquated that are still effective. And there are parts of teaching digitally here in 2021 and beyond that are ineffective. And again, if we blend the best of both worlds, there we go, using the word blended, we can come up with a better way, or at least the possibility of a better way of teaching and learning. So over the course of this episode, I am going to talk about what blended learning is, why blended learning is important, the benefits of blended learning, and I'm going to impart some EdTech recommendations for tools and resources that you could consider going forward. But I really think it starts with the mindset of not wanting to go back to the way you used to do things. For me, it's been a challenge. Now, people all throughout the pandemic, would come and tell me, oh, Nessie, you've been training for this your whole life, with all the technology and stuff that you do and you use. And yes, to some degree, I've had a lot of success in engaging my students, trying to engage my students, and adapting things I used to do and trying to find ways to make the project-based learning work and, the group work and the collaboration and all the things that I have talked about in terms of, the 4 C's. How can I make those still a prevalent part of what was, for part of this year, my virtual classroom, and now as I'm finishing this school year, my hybrid classroom? So how do I bring these together, and how do I plan for a September where, for all intents and purposes, I am planning to be obviously at my school and to have 100% of my students in the room? Now, could that change? Absolutely. Will it change? Your guess is as good as mine. But I need to have a plan in place. I can always adjust. I can get to the line of scrimmage. I can call an audible. I can, decide to swing away. Insert sports metaphor here. But where do we go? How do we get there? What do we do? Blended learning. Now, this might be a new term for you. So let's create a foundation. What is blended learning? Blended learning is a mixture, a blend, if you will, of learning methods that incorporate multiple teaching models, mostly digital and traditional face-to-face teaching and learning? How do we bring the two together? Blended learning is what we need to focus on as we enter the post-pandemic lockdown world of 2020 and 2021. We need to reevaluate the human component in the learning experience. A blended approach ensures that students are engaged and driving their individual learning experiences. This approach also helps cater to the individual needs of the student. We know that every student has a unique learning style, and a blended approach is more likely to cater to those needs than a traditional classroom teaching experience. Why is this important? Blended learning is important because it breaks down the traditional walls of teaching, ones that don't work for all students. And now, with access to all the different technologies we have, and a lot of us got thrust into using new technologies in new ways over the last year, we now have resources that we can even better tailor to the learning experience for each student. Blended learning also offers flexible time frames. We've heard a lot about flexibility and patience and empathy. We can't go backwards on those things. Okay? Period. Stop. Can't go backwards. We need to continue to be empathetic. If for a majority of your career you were strict on deadlines and during the pandemic you weren't so strict on deadlines and due dates, did the world end? No. So do we need strict deadlines and due dates? Probably not. I was never one to be hard fast on due dates and deadlines, other than like the end of a marking period or semester where you got to get the grades in. So there's some things that we do need to be continue to be bound to. It's kind of where I'm at with that. But again, blended learning, it is flexible, and it should be flexible. Education should be flexible. This offers people the ability to learn at their own pace. So also something to consider. Schools and classrooms, as I've said in a number of recent episodes, we were thrust into taking a new approach into imparting wisdom and knowledge onto our students this year. Traditional classroom teaching techniques had to be tossed away, and a new system had to be put in place for virtual teaching, for hybrid teaching. Okay? It's different shades of blended learning. That's what we've all experienced in the last year. Teachers who embrace this new classroom style, they are going to easily continue to reap the benefits of having their old methods enhanced with the use of new technology. Overall, let's not forget this, overall, our most important stakeholders, the students, will continue to benefit from combining the old and the new. For anybody who is still not convinced that this is where we need to go, consider the following, either for yourself or go to chrisnessy.com/179 on your best friend's cell phone who might be skeptical of all of this, and have them listen. So what are the benefits of blended learning? Number one, blended learning makes education more accessible. Number two, teachers can become more engaged with their students. And number three, blended learning is more fun. I've got control of the board. Let's start with number one. So blended learning makes education more accessible. What does that mean? With traditional teaching methods, educational materials were only available during classroom hours. Students may have been able to take home their textbooks, but they didn't have a way to actually interact with or engage with the material beyond a textbook. With new apps and other technological advances, our students have more flexibility to access and engage with their content from home. We know this. We did it virtually. We've done it in hybrid. Students can access content at home. They can continue to access content at home. Accessibility might help students develop a greater interest in learning, and that might lead to more successful outcomes. Number two, teachers can become more engaged with their students. Blended learning presents an increased opportunity for students to connect with us, their teachers. We know they can now connect via email. They can look at their progress reports. They can post on tools like Flipgrid. We've done the social emotional learning. We know how important it is more than ever and going forward to really foster positive relationships with our students. In the end, students and teachers like you and me, we benefit from this in a shift in the relationship. We can stay in touch with our students' progress. while students can ask more questions and gain deeper knowledge and understanding. Something I'm a big proponent of in the high school and the college classroom is student accountability and taking responsibility and ownership of your education. Students in many places were forced into that at all grade levels. We can't go backwards on that. Benefit number 3, blended learning is fun. Yes, it can be fun. You know why? Because I don't care what year it is, students will always dread a lengthy lecture and a boring seminar. Now, they find that learning can be more fun, which is extremely advantageous to you and me and the students. An entire generation of students, K through 12 right now, have discovered that blended learning can be fun. Teachers like you and me bent over backwards to try and put on a show, right? We can continue to do that and have fun. I've been saying for months, it's got to be fun. Actually, you know what? I've been saying that for years. I need to have fun doing what I'm doing. If I'm not having fun and enjoying teaching, how can I expect my students to enjoy learning? That's impossible. Students might be more apt to pursue higher education if they continue to have a positive experience in middle and high school now. Fun shouldn't be underestimated as one of the many benefits of blended learning. It should almost be, I didn't put these in any particular order, but fun should be at the top of the list. You should enjoy yourself, and your students should be enjoying themselves. Blended learning has the potential to make learning fun. So those are my 3 benefits of blended learning. Are there more? Absolutely. I'm going to share a couple because I got some input from the House of EdTech Discord community, which I will share in a few minutes. But now tools. You've got some benefits, and there are more than the 3 I shared. Okay? You can go to Uncle Google and you could search benefits of blended learning. There's more reasons out there. Now, some recommendations. How do we make this happen? This is the House of EdTech, so let's give you some tech tools to consider. And I've broken this down into 4 categories. So first, we have learning management systems. Number 2, we have our online texts and resources. Number 3, we've got tools to create and organize our content. And number 4, we've got content, right? So learning management system. Undoubtedly, you or your school or your district, you've got a learning management system in place. If you or someone you know does not have a well-defined, you must use fill in the blank learning management system here, you can consider tools like Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, Edmodo, Blackboard. We just need a place for all the content to live. Someplace where you can build modules. You know, in Google Classroom, we can have the different topics. In Canvas, you can have modules, and you can, depending on the learning management system, you can get really sophisticated with unlocking things and, you know, almost gamifying, and kids can unlock content as they go. But it depends on what platform you're using to set this all up. But give consideration, weigh the benefits and the positives and the negatives, and use the learning management system that's best for you. Unless, of course, that decision has been made for you, then you go with that. Number 2, online texts and resources. So where are you going to get some content, right? I don't know of a lot of districts that are still buying big, bulky textbooks. Maybe there's a way to eliminate it. Maybe you keep those in the classroom. Not really sure. It's different from classroom to classroom. But some places you can consider getting resources would be OER Commons, Project Gutenberg, and Planet eBook. Great places to get resources. Project Gutenberg, as I was researching this episode, has over 60,000 free ebooks, and Planet eBook is full of free ebooks. There is more than enough places, especially when you talk about open education resources like you get with OER Commons. There are more than enough places to get content. So don't ever feel, I don't know where to go. I just gave you 3 places you could get content to teach your students. My social studies department, we've got an adopted textbook, but myself and everybody in my department, nobody uses the textbook. So, and that's just in history. So again, high school is not so advanced that you can't find information on Algebra 1 or biology or chemistry, right? We're not having algebraic discovery at the high school level. Algebra has been algebra, I don't know, for like 2,000 years, something like that. So don't feel or let anybody tell you, well, we need textbooks. We can't get the content. Where are we going to get the content from? It's called the internet. All right. Get on Twitter, there's more than enough places where you can find reliable content to teach with. All right. I just gave you 3 examples. Tools to create and organize video content. If you're like me, you made screencasts, you recorded Google Meets, you know how to make videos. All right. You've made presentations, you've made ed puzzles, you've done it all in the last year. And you can continue to do that. You can continue to post things on YouTube and Google Drive and leverage Flipgrid to interact with students and do screencasts. And all of those things should still be happening. And if it's not you creating the content, again, I'm not big on reinventing the wheel. Now, there might be some videos and some topics and some lessons where you've got to be the star of the show. But in many cases, the wheel has already been carved. It's already round. It rolls. It is good. All right. So you can consider places like Smarter Every Day, YouTube Learning, Veritasium, AsapSCIENCE, Crash Course or Crash Course Kids, MIT's Open Courseware, MIT's K-12 videos, great resources like Bozeman Science, PBS Idea Channel. Vimeo has instructional videos, straight up regular YouTube. All right. And then when you bring in something like Edpuzzle, you can get your kids content. You can get them creating content. You can get them engaged in consuming content, not just uploading PDFs of your worksheets and, your dittos and your busy work. It takes work. I'm not saying blended learning is this magical thing that you can just say, I do a blended learning classroom and I just go out and I find videos for kids to watch. And, it's got to be a blend. So how are you leveraging out of class time versus what you're doing within class time? All right. So blended learning, it's the face-to-face, it's the digital, it's the flipped classroom. It is everything. Okay. Now, where do we go from here? I'm going to try to make this what my classroom is all about. And in many respects, this is what my classroom is about. Again, I don't do tests. I don't do quizzes. Everything is mostly project-based. So I ask kids to do things in class. We have conversations, we have discussions, and at least for my class, I'm not asking them to do a whole heck of a lot outside of class time. I might try some new things in the coming school year, 2021, 2022. Had to think about my numbers for a second. But, we will see what happens. Again, education, this is all one big experiment, right? I remember, hearing from Don Wettrick, and Don tells the story all the time about how early in his career, his dad told him, you can teach the same way for 30 years, or you can teach differently 30 times. So maybe it's time to try something different, whether it's me, whether it's you. Blended learning, really diving in. I'm inspired to create even more. I did a lot of this year live. I didn't do a lot of pre-recorded stuff because I thrive in the live setting. Only here doing things like the podcast am I really putting in the prep work to think about, what I want to say, how I want to say it, and how I want to present it. But what I do and did at Rutgers, did a lot of live streams that were then available pre-recorded. But, I'm not one to totally sit down and want to, I'm pretending to look at, my webcam, but to sit and try and make a whole flip learning video. Again, maybe I'm leaning on some of these other sources for content, but certainly I can give my students space to explore and really get into history in possibly a new way. And that's exciting to me. Whatever subject you teach, find what's going to make it exciting for you and bring that love, or continue to bring that excitement and expose your students to that excitement. And to that end, you kind of just have to give it a try, right? It rings true, right? We say that every episode. We're going to say it for the 179th time in just a few minutes, but we need to just give it a try. Blended learning should be where we go from here. It shouldn't be going backwards to whatever you were doing before the pandemic. Blended learning, this is your opportunity. This is your chance to change your career for the better. It's going to impact you in a positive way. It's going to impact your students in a positive way. I really believe that. Now, what were you doing before the pandemic? Were you implementing blended learning strategies before the world changed in February and March of 2020? I want to know about it. Go to chrisnessy.com/feedback. And I think this is a conversation that we can continue to have, through the summer in some upcoming episodes. So I really want to make sure that, whenever you hear this episode, share your thoughts on this. Go to chrisnessy.com/feedback, or better yet, join the Discord community. Go to chrisnessy.com/Discord, get it on your phone, download it on your desktop. A few months ago, I moved away from Facebook for the community for the podcast, and Discord has allowed me to connect with listeners like you in, I think, a more effective, ad-free, less Facebooky, creepy, cringy way. So that's where the conversation and community is growing around the House of EdTech, chrisnessy.com/Discord. And to bring that in here, in advance of this episode, I did put out the call on the Discord community where I said, this episode is going to be about blended learning. Do you have any thoughts on blended learning tools and strategies? Lee T in Discord said, one of the things I've enjoyed about doing blended learning is using something like Edpuzzle for lessons. It saves time and then frees me up in class to work more one-on-one with students who need more help. Lee, I couldn't agree more. And user Shiznell, he agrees with Lee, and he says, it's really all about moving what is better suited to individual study to a digital space so that we can be best accomplished with physical bodies together in what can be done there. That doesn't mean, though, that we just upload all of our worksheets to the digital area and assign the most boring, onerous, uncompelling parts of the classroom to the home computer. What a great way to turn kids off to digital learning, no matter how clever the app seems. He goes on to say, instead, we need to see the digital world as both transformational and complementary to what we do in the classroom. What dynamic methods for learning can we create in digital spaces? He says, mine are often gamified and involve guest speakers and characters who interact with students, collaborative asynchronous projects that partner with community and business events, or just project design functions where kids work with Trello or Bandcamp or Slack or similar apps to learn how to plan long-term projects with dependencies. I took it, I look at all of this using the SAMR model where I can. Of course, I can offload lecture and basic skill stuff to mini video lessons over live lecture, so that's much better. So a few tools that he uses, Flipgrid, obviously. He uses Perusall for collaborative annotation, Goose Chase for fun and physical extensions, and whatever LMS he's on at the time where he can design learning paths and dependencies based on student successes and choices. So thank you to Lee and Shiznell for sharing in the Discord community. If you want to go over to Discord, again, it's chrisnessy.com/Discord, or go to chrisnessy.com/feedback. So that's my thoughts on blended learning. That's where I want to go. And again, this is the beginning of the conversation, and I hope you'll join me on this journey through the summer and into next school year. And, we can do this together. We are better together. I think that's on a t-shirt somewhere. All right. Before we get out of here today, let's meet our newest House of EdTech VIP. And I had to double check, and I'm really sorry, but this person should have been a VIP much sooner than right now. But I want to introduce you to Scott Nunes. He's been on the podcast before. He was a pal of mine. He's a podcaster, and we met face-to-face for the first time at ISTE 2019. You remember 2019? That was like 6 years ago, right? But Scott Nunes is a teacher. He's a coach. He's a Microsoft expert. He is Google certified level 1 and 2. He's a Wakelet ambassador. He's all about Q. He's a Nearpod guy, and he hosts 2 podcasts. He hosts the TNT EdTech podcast and the Education Today podcasts. You can find more information about Scott at tntedtech.com, and he is on Twitter at Mr. Nunes Teach. There'll be a link to all of this in the show notes out at chrisnessy.com/179. And congratulations to you, Scott Nunes. You are a House of EdTech VIP. Thanks again for making House of EdTech a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. I really appreciate you checking out the episode and being a part of this. I hope you'll come over to the Discord community, and I hope you're following me on Twitter, and I hope we are engaging with each other, because I truly believe we do this together. I make this podcast for me, I make it for you, and it brings us together to do what we do better. So let's keep the conversation going. I'd love to connect with you, and I want to hear your thoughts on blended learning. I want to hear your resources that you're using, the tech tools that you're using. Go to chrisnessy.com/179. You'll see the links to everything that I have assembled, and you can leave a comment, you can click, you can send a voice message. There's a number of ways you can get in touch with me. Go to chrisnessy.com/feedback. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, hey, you got this far. You're still listening, and I really appreciate that. Just do me a solid. Best thing you could do. Go tell somebody else about the podcast. That's the best way you can share a podcast that you enjoy. If you share it on social media, use the hashtag HouseOfEdTech. The other thing you could consider, and I would love it if you would check this out, you could become an awesome supporter of the House of EdTech. Many thanks to my current awesome supporters, and this program is powered by Patreon.com, which allows a consumer of content like you to support a creator of content like me. Special thanks to Anthony Arnaud, Dan Gallagher, Carlos Garza, Peggy George, Jeff Herb, Mike Messner, Matt Miller, JP Presavento, Patty Reefus, Lori Simpson, and Kyle Wilcox. Thank you to each and every one of you for your support. You are truly awesome. And if you want to be awesome, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. Check it out. The next episode of the podcast is going to come out on June 6th, 2021, and that's going to be episode 180. My goodness. What are we going to talk about? It'll probably be end of the school year related. Hopefully I'll get some feedback from you and we can continue this blended learning conversation. Or if you've got an idea for a show, I'm not saying I don't have any ideas, but we're in this together, right? So if there's something you'd like to talk about, reach out to me. Let me know. We can put a conversation together and we can create a beautiful episode. Just me and you. Until next time, thank you for learning with me. And remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try. I mean, come on. There's so many tools out there. Just do it. Just give it a try. I'll see you guys next time.